In this episode of the RV Small Talk podcast, we're going to pick up right where we left off last time with Vaughn Hindley from MDC USA. Now, we carry their trailers here, and we had a long backstory, a fantastic backstory episode last time. So if you missed it, check it out. But this time, we're going into the depths, the details of what makes an MDC trailer what it is and capable of what it can do. So, welcome to the RV Small Talk podcast. We are your hosts from Princecraft RV. We might talk about lightweight trailers and truck campers, people, places, and adventures, and sometimes even I mess up the intro. I'm Clint.
I'm PJ.
And I'm ready to talk about some nerdy trailer stuff.
Oh, bring it on. Vaughn, welcome back.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, it feels like we went and got coffee and
sat down again.
Sat back down for more talking because we're having a good time.
Funny how that happens. Well, we took so long talking about just Australia, the cool stuff, how it started, you dealing blackjack, and I don't know, all kinds of fun things. Mm-hmm. Now we need to talk about the trailers.
Yeah. Yeah, because they are what they are and can do what they can do. We need to know why.
And if you haven't figured it out by now, these are really cool off-road trailers, rugged on the outside, luxurious on the inside. That's the thumbnail.
So if I could say just real quick, if like elevator pitch style, what makes an MDC trailer?
Elevator pitch. Can you explain that to me?
So an elevator pitch
an
is
English translation.
Yeah. So an elevator pitch is when you have an idea that you want someone to understand within the amount of time it would take for you to ride in an elevator with them because you got trapped in an elevator. And they say, so what do? You have an elevator ride.
It's basically like saying like the short version.
Yeah.
Yeah. The short selling spiel. Why buy MDC?
Yeah. What?
Yeah. What makes an MDC so cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess MDC is a robust, overlanding, full off-road, go anywhere you dare product that you can park up, live in, be absolutely comfortable, have all the day-to-day comforts, off-grid in a remote area, and have the confidence to actually get you back to where you started.
Yeah.
You keep mentioning that, and I think it's so cool. People don't usually talk about getting you back. They talk about you can go anywhere, but I guess it is kind of important to get back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's only half the journey, and our motto is escape with confidence. So you can have the confidence in the MDC product that is going to get you to where you want to go, but most important, get you and your family back home.
And if you're talking about camping in the outback, getting back home is pretty important. Being stranded has a whole new meaning if you are 300 miles from civilization.
Absolutely. You can run out of things like water, food, and then, that becomes dangerous.
Which has always been like when your products first showed up here on our lot, and there was they have how much water capacity?
First of all,
you have how much water capacity?
Let's just say when the MDC showed up on this lot, I thought it was Clint's best day ever. He was so excited. He ran inside the building and said, "Everybody come look." Mm-hmm. And then he just picked everybody's brain on what everything was. Clint was like a kid in a candy store that day. It was adorable.
I might be blushing, but you can't tell because of my beard.
Adorable.
I can tell you why.
I
like having nice, long, hot showers in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And since it's
like the pinnacle of off-road luxury.
Not only that, your trailers come with a nice shower room for the outside, so you could pick your location for that nice hot shower.
Two showers.
You could actually have no shower tent and just be out in the wild having a shower.
Well,
Not
if you're
opposed.
300 miles from civilization, then why
I watched
not?
way too much Naked and Afraid for this. So we keep talking about MDC being an off-road caravan, being able to get you places, to get you back, being, super rugged. I think anybody listening, as well as everybody in this room, knows that there are other off-road rugged campers out there.
Yeah.
So,
or that there's rednecks out there who will take any camper regardless if it's designed for it.
So there's lots of campers claiming to be the biggest, the baddest, the most rugged. So as we're talking about MDCs and the components it has, can you just kind of give me an overview of like why MDC is different than maybe some of these other big brands that are claim the same thing you claim?
Yeah, and there's two different parts. So the environment that we actually use these products for the last 17 years in Australia is very different to what you have in the US. So, these things have to stand up. They have to be built tough. They have to be rugged. What's different about MDC is we control the manufacturing process from the raw materials to the final product. And so the only thing that we don't do in-house is the actual galvanization of the frame. So we source the aluminium, the steel, all the raw components, the major components. So things like jockey wheels we don't make, or windows we don't make.
Right.
But the actual structure.
Yeah. And so the aluminium composite panel, that comes in raw. The steel, like everything is cut and welded and fabricated in our manufacturing facility from the ground up. So we control the whole process. Other companies will outsource things. So one factory will make the chassis. Another factory might make the suspension. The swing arms on our product we actually make in-house.
Yeah.
And was this making in-house, was that an important part to you from the beginning?
Absolutely, because you need to control the whole process, because we source the materials, so we're in control of the thickness of the materials that we use, the grades of steel, how they're actually fabricated, how they're welded together. We use state-of-the-art machines. So if you look at our chassis, some chassis manufacturers will actually get the RHS. Is it called RHS in the US? Might be called tube steel.
Yeah.
So, and they'll have it on a bench and they'll just have a drop saw, and that's how they cut. We actually have a 3D laser machine that does all the cutting. And so it physically grabs the RHS, and a typical laser machine is only one-dimensional.
Right.
Where you've got a flat panel and lasers things out, CNC.
Sure. Right.
This is I think it's a 6-axis CNC tubular laser cutter, which is state-of-the-art, which means every time you cut a component, it's all computer done, right? It's accurate. And when you go to weld this up, there's no human error. Like everything fits.
Yeah.
100% of the time, and you're taking out all of the guesswork. And so when you look at things like powder coating, painting, we're sourcing the powder coat, we're sourcing the paint, we're applying that to the structure within our control. We're not sending it down the road for someone else to do it. And so that means, we control the quality. It's all within. It has to meet our standard. And sometimes when you outsource things, the materials can be thinned, or they use a cheaper paint or a different paint. And plus also you need consistency, right? If we want to do repairs on a product here, we need to be able to source the same materials. And if you're going to different suppliers for different things, then how do you get consistency?
Right.
I think that is a real important point, because in the industry here, there is always a shifting in where they're getting the product.
Always.
Sometimes we'll say, we need cushions from 2 years ago. They'll say, oh no, we don't source from that guy anymore, so we don't have those cushions. We can get these. Or plastics, the rotomolds, the front caps that are fiberglassed. They are all done by the fiberglass cap maker, and all these little pieces are done by some company that they pay to make that one piece. Well, if that company says, hey, I don't want to do that anymore, or they go out of business, or they run out of raw materials, or they change their raw materials, you get a problem down the road, but you don't know until you've built 100 or more units. They're out there in the field and something fails.
Yeah. So in Australia, we have just over 40,000 units delivered to our customers since we started doing tent trailers since 2007. There's been a market shift away from tent trailers in the last 10 years into travel trailers for MDC. But we still have customers that go, hey, I've got this MDC that I bought from you guys 15 years ago, and I've broken a particular tent pole, and it's always the U-pole. And the U-poles, it holds the tent up and goes across. They're very complex to make. But we can actually go to our partner factory and go, hey, we've got this model. It's a MDC 2000 MDC 6005 was the tent. It's a U-pole, goes in this location. Can you make one and send it over to us?
And that, to me, is the definition of exploring with confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, when MDC has such confidence in their product because they see it from beginning to end and they can do it confidently, then the consumer is going to be confident, saying, oh, MDC's got my back if something happens.
Yeah, and this is something in the U.S. where you were talking about, you take responsibility from the components on up. There are a lot of trailers built in the U.S. and Canadian markets where they all go to the same chassis manufacturer, roll it in, and then they design, well, what can we put on this? So there's a lot of those rolling trailers out there. But you own it from what steel you bring in, what aluminum you bring in, and then you use your 360-degree laser cutting machine. And I like that it's MDC has taken responsibility and ownership from ground up, and so you'll really only have to deal with you for if you're digging for confidence on what you're buying.
Well, that's where the consumer is really going to have a better experience. And in the end, the reputation is everything. So if the customer can call you or a dealer, and the dealer can call you and say, hey, I need this component. This trailer's 5 years old. You know exactly what it is. Can we get, say, an electrical diagram from something that was built 3 years ago?
Absolutely. And that's what we pride ourselves on. And so
it's mind-blowing.
User manuals are a big thing for us. And that's another thing where people copy, right?
Right.
So our user manuals in Australia, they're like 90 pages. The guy that actually creates them...
90 pages.
Yeah, Steve Zammit. He did the first one. And we've actually lifted the standard ourselves in RVs in Australia based off what we did with our user manual.
Real quick, is Steve the one who's on your training videos?
Yes, he's Mr. Masterclass.
Yes,
that's great.
He's smart.
And Masterclass.
And he communicates well too.
Yeah, we created that because we wanted to show our customers how to use the product correctly. Because if they don't understand how to use the product, they'll make mistakes and they'll break things and they'll get angry, and then that's our fault. But if we can educate them how to use the product correctly, take some of the noise away from you and I, PJ, right?
Right, but it also helps the customer have a better experience. And that...
confidence.
And confidence. Yes. And explore with confidence. Escape with confidence.
So I think
get it.
It's almost like there's two areas of performance that really mean something to the consumer. The product has to perform, but then in the entire user experience, the company has to perform. And it's like MDC's kind of paid attention to that area as well, because a lot of companies out there is just simply, can I get a product out there? And does it look good enough? And can it kind of explain itself well enough that they're like, yeah, I'll buy it. Yeah.
And as a manufacturer, we have to offer support. And as PJ said, can you get a wiring diagram on our product? Absolutely, yes. And why is that? It's because we want to make sure you're retailing our product to the market. We want to make sure that if the customers have a problem, that it can get rectified. But also it's better for me as a manufacturer, because you know that finding a wiring gremlin without having a wiring diagram is going to be expensive. It's going to cost a lot of money. And at the end of the day, I'm going to get that bill right. So if I give your techs the information, they're going to fault find quicker and we're both going to win. Customers going to get the product turned around quicker, back on the road.
Everyone's
and with the
quality and the technicality that goes into your trailers, that is going to attract, especially the overland market. That attracts a lot of do-it-yourselfers.
Yes, and tech heads.
A lot of people who are engineering minded, and even if they're not changing something, having those diagrams available to them, it gives them a level of comfort.
Confidence.
Yep. So they can escape with confidence. And even if they don't do huge mods, I mean, Overland Trailers, that's where we see all the mods.
Yes.
And they get to see it, adjust. And I bet that in Australia especially, there is somebody who takes all the calls of people who need to know, hey, can I do this? If I do this, will that work? I mean, it's a tricky thing. And that is something that is unheard of in the U.S. with most manufacturers.
Can I talk about wiring? And Lindsay,
No.
you might want to tune out for 5
La,
minutes.
la, 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 la.
But
Thanks for the warning.
but Clint's going to love this.
Bring it on. Hold on, let me take a sip. I'm ready.
Wiring and safety, right? So you have to use the correct thickness of wires, because if you actually skimp, and copper's expensive, right?
Yes.
If you skimp on the size of wires, it gets hot.
Yes.
It can create fires. You also have to think about safety. So you can have circuit breakers that just blow, or fuses, or you can go to a more expensive option, which is better for the customer out in the wild, resettable circuit breakers.
Okay. Those things are everywhere. And I point them out to as many people as I can. Like, there's a circuit breaker and it's resettable. It's not a fuse. They're all over the place.
So what's the reason
There's
for that?
redundancy in there, and everything isolates itself.
Yeah.
It's so if anything happens, you can tell what happens to what piece of equipment real quick. You can start to troubleshoot that piece of equipment, and nothing else has had harm caused to it.
Yeah, and because if you have a short circuit for some reason, like, I don't know, the customer's in there doing modifications and cut something and earth's the positive,
Right.
you know, it can create a fire. That's a safety system built in that will, if there's a short circuit, electricity is cut off.
Right.
And a cheap way of doing it is fuses, but you're out in the middle of nowhere, 300 miles from anywhere, and you bust a fuse. And
You replace it two or three times.
You don't have one to replace it.
Right.
Then you got to put a nail or something in there, right?
Right.
Like that's what all the overlanders do, crazy stuff. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But
Hey,
also-
if you're in the middle of nowhere, you need to get back, put a nail in it.
There's entire DIY guides on what fuse relates to what household product. Like a bobby pin is like a, let's say, a 20 amp fuse.
Joking.
No,
That's a thing?
it's a thing. You
For
can
high current, use a nail.
Exactly. So it's depending on what fuse you blew, there's a diagram for what you can use in its place that isn't a fuse. By the way, don't do this.
Okay, but
But it's out
Vaughn
there.
is talking about, are you saying in MDCs there are no fuses?
No, they're resettable circuit breakers.
They refused.
We refused the fuse. And, you know, it's more cost, but it's also doing the right thing and giving the customers a better experience. Another thing too is sometimes when things are being made by other manufacturers is they might not solder the wires. They might just twist them and a bit of electrical tape, right? That's not going to work in a serious off-road situation.
Right.
When you're out there and you got your weekend warrior who's just putting it behind his big F-250, doing things he shouldn't be doing, you know, it's
It
going to
feels
be...
good to say F250, doesn't it?
Have you tried 350 or are you just not ready for that
We've
yet?
actually got an F650.
Yes, I was going to ask 550, but 650,
but
sir.
that's for towing our vans from our manufacturing facility to here, right?
Yeah.
On the back of one of our trailers.
Well, you know, Australia, got to try to do it bigger and better.
Do we have any trailers on our lot that don't have fuses besides MDCs? Is that a thing?
I'd have to think.
That's not a thing, right?
I don't think we do.
That's not a thing. Well, that's pretty crazy. I had no idea. I've literally sold an MDC before, just one.
Awesome.
But I had no idea that was a thing. God, I'm learning so much.
They're fuseless.
Plus all the wires being soldered. And so
Soldered,
it
yeah.
soldered creates a strong connection.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
It's not confusing. Now you know.
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
are we-
We have to say words that have fuse in it.
We don't. Clint does. Let's be clear.
You're not confused?
I'm confident in my journey.
And she might escape confidently.
See, this podcast is a fusion between just banter and information.
Stop.
Well, that's really cool. Okay, if we back up, then you said you like to have the raw materials that you try to do everything in-house. Most people who see your trailer are going to recognize it as a chassis that comes from China. That is kind of what the thought is out there.
She did air quotes with that.
I did air quotes, yes. Only because, I mean, that in the U.S. sounds like the cheap way to do things. Now, why should people think about that differently? And how did that start? How did it happen? Tell me about that piece of it.
Yeah, I guess when you're working with a factory in a foreign country, there's two different ways you can do things. You can be like Apple and you give them the product, how it's made, what it needs to do, what are the components that need to be in that particular product, or you're going to go buy a product off the shelf from a China factory that they've actually done all the engineering on and they've decided what's inside and you don't actually know. And, you know, down the track, they might change components without even telling you, right? And so what you get from order to order can be completely different. There was a company that started in the US before us that consistency of componentry was an issue. They're still here now, but may not later.
Right.
Might be going through a bit of a black period, I'm not sure. But what we do is we can...
Okay, I don't mind saying it. All right, you were so kind. Your product is often compared to Black Series.
Absolutely.
Okay? And we can talk about that in a minute when you explain the importing, but they have had a similar experience of importing chassis.
But different because...
So
we control the IP, the intel, the componentry used, how they're put together, the drawings, how things are built. For instance, when you talked about an electrical diagram, could you get one? If you ask for a drawing of a sidewall, the internals of a sidewall of an MDC, because a customer said, I want to drill a hole here for some reason, can I do that? Is there anything behind it? We could actually give you that CAD drawing for your text to go, no, there's wiring running through there, or
whatever.
There's a reason.
Because you provided that information to the factory in China that builds your product.
Yeah, and it's absolutely, it's similar to what Apple does with the iPhone.
So nobody seems to mind that their Apple phone is made in China.
Yeah, but they have control of the whole process. And this is the thing too. We are on a one-to-one relationship with the factory that we use. We were the first company in the world to build a hybrid caravan in China. And then everything that you see coming out of China, either to the US or Australia or anywhere else in the world, is a copy or a derivative of what we built back in the day. But because we're the first, we know how to do it properly.
So when you are saying that you have control of all the raw materials, are you saying that you have control of the raw materials in the China factory? Absolutely.
So we have a team of Australians on the ground that are there day in, day out and working with our partner factory on, if they're going to look at a different material, it has to be signed off by James Field. When they buy steel from the steel factory, there's certificates that come with the steel that actually verify the grade and the tensile strength of the raw steel. And we're ISO 9001 certified. I don't know if you're familiar with ISO 9001.
Yes.
It's a high standard that you need to meet in processes in your business. And we're ISO 9001 in our China partner and our Australian factory and our US assembly factory.
Okay.
Which is a pretty high standard.
Yeah. And when you say you're one-to-one, that means that factory is only focused and dedicated to you.
Absolutely. We've grown up
They don't
together.
do anything else.
Nope.
They don't build any other products there.
Nope.
They work directly for you.
Yep.
So
exclusive.
Yeah, it sounds
relationship.
like the difference. I mean, I get we do hear that a lot is like, oh, they build it in China. But I think the difference here is you're not saying, yeah, let's just make them build this thing or whatever. We'll come over here and sell it at ours. You're talking about you just have a partnership with a factory that happens to be in China that you control, and they physically build it.
It's a joint venture.
So totally different than what people might be thinking of when they think of, oh, it came from China.
Yeah. So this factory, and it's grown over the years, they were given government land based off our investment in the factory. So for instance, if Lindsay's RVs comes knocking on the door and goes, hey, I really love the MDC product. Can you make that for me? And I'll
white label it for me, and I'll slap my stickers
I'll call it
on
Lindsay's RV.
Yeah.
They'll just say, no, I'm sorry.
What if I smile and bat my eyelash just like this? Please.
I'm not. Don't think it will work. People have tried.
People have tried.
What is please
Absolutely.
in
See
Chinese?
if they'll build something great for them as well.
Yeah, because they see our business model and what we've built from the ground up, and they're like, hey, we'd like to have a piece of this. And so then what happens is you get copy factories that try and make our product. And so we'll release a new model. You'll see it on the website. And then you got these other factories that are like, oh, MDC's come out with something cool. Let's go build that. But they make copies. They don't understand, for instance, how to build an RV, because there are no RVs traveling around in China. Yeah. They just don't do what we do in the US and do in Australia, right? So they don't know how to build the product from the ground up. And so looking from the outside in, they think they can build an RV, but they just won't stand up. They'll use incorrect glues, materials. Things will fail. They don't understand putting fuses in wiring.
Right.
And there has been some products brought into the US market that have beat MDC to the market, were very popular over COVID, but they weren't built correctly. And there's been some failures, like, the delaminating of panels on the inside.
Right.
So things where the edge banding just peel off. And that's because they use the incorrect glue. When you're out using your RV, say in the middle of Arizona, and it's 100, or Death Valley, and it's 130 degrees Fahrenheit, it's very hot inside the RV. The glues can melt if you're not using the correct glue. You need to use a high temperature polyurethane that will only melt at around 300 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're using a typical glue, say on this table, that's going to be inside all the time, it's a cheaper low temperature glue. If you put this outside at 130 degrees, it may start to delaminate, or the glues go soft. So that, it's having the knowledge of what materials to use that are going to stand up.
And deciding
that's the
to
MDC difference, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I could see a lot of products out there that have come over. I'm like, that's like the Temu or Alibaba version
Is it
of
only
something that matters.
Yeah.
You buy a 22 foot and get a 22 inch.
Right, exactly. or it comes over and you're like, this just really feels lightweight. Or you can tell that they looked at a picture and they tried to reverse engineer off of just an image. And you're like, the sizes are all wonky, you know?
This is another thing too, right? If you're not in control of the factory on a one-to-one, what will happen is you will buy a product and it will be like this, and the first one will be really good. And then particularly if you don't give the factory any profit, if you try and screw them down on price, which business owners can do, they're just going to thin out the materials. So what was 3 mil will now be 2.8, then it'll be 2.6, and then it'll be 2.4, and then it will fail. And you go, what's going on? This thing broke. Oh yeah, we'll just knock it up to 2.6.
Right.
You know what I mean? But because we work with our factory in a one-on-one relationship, we have worked together over all this time. I let them make profit, I'm making profit. We sort of share the love. What I really like is when we started with these guys, we've only ever had 2 factories we've worked with, and we still work with both of them. The small guy, he just does tent trailers and he only does one model. And we've been working with him since 2007. The other factory that we do the hybrids with, we started in 2011. What I really like is when we first started with them, their team rocked up every day on bicycles. 3 years later, they've got mopeds. Now they're all got cars. So,
You've lifted a community.
Absolutely. And the factory has...
It's actually really sweet. Caitlin, don't cry. She looks like she's going to cry.
The factory has, and it is family. And this is when we talk about the quality, right? We hold our team to a very high standard. We believe in doing training across our business here and also our partner in China. And people try to take our staff all the time because we know how to build a product. So it's either our engineers in Australia or it's the engineers in China. People try to get to take them because they go, hey, we can go build a factory down the road and we'll just copy MDC product because we know that they're the second largest brand in Australia and we want a piece of that.
Right.
But if you look after your people and you give them a good life, they're not going to leave you. But also the knowledge that your people within your business, and you know this, PJ, if you lose critical people, it's so hard to replace and you actually have knowledge leaving your business. So we look after our team, they stay with us. What we've learnt in overlanding or off-road going back to, 10, 15 years actually stays within the business.
Yeah.
That is the opposite of what most people think about having something built substantial in China. The idea is you're there because it's cheap labor and you can get a cheap product. And the idea that you can support that company, raise your standards, keep them really high, have full control, and also pay them well is kind of backwards from, I think, what most people expect is happening and what most companies do. So hats off to you. My question is, why not do that in Australia? Why couldn't you have that factory in Australia?
Yeah, and we've tried. So we started in 2016, started a brand called OzRV. And
OzRV?
Yeah, OzRV. It's short for Australian RV. And
OzRV.
And so, we talk about taking people out of other businesses. The manufacturing manager for JK, biggest brand in Australia, has decided he no longer wants to work for JK. Went to another company, didn't work out. He moved from Melbourne to Brisbane. Then I had an opportunity. He said, look, I'm looking to do something. I'll show you how to build caravans in Australia. I've worked for 20 years. He's come from South Africa. I know how to build, caravans from scratch. Let's do it. So brought him in. Let's get it done. Our people on the ground that we could acquire in Australia didn't have the same work ethic as what we were used to, the guys in China. So we couldn't get them to work to the same standards, or sometimes they have their own minds and think, hey, this is not how you cork this. I've got a better idea. I know how to do it better.
And they just call their shot on the line and you find out later.
Yeah. And, we just couldn't get the same quality that we were getting out of our China partner that we'd grown up together with. And we tried to bring that same quality in the Australian business, but we just couldn't get, and the product was just not to the same standard.
Right.
And it costs a lot more.
Right.
For us. And so we actually, it almost sent us bankrupt trying to do that business, but the MDC side is what held us up.
Wow.
But me being stubborn, I'm like, I just want to keep going. We can make this work. But I had to turn it off, I think, in 2019.
So it wasn't, part of it was that it cost more, but part of it was you couldn't get the quality that you wanted. Much harder to control the workforce.
Yeah, and this might sound kind of bad. In China, if you don't do a good job, you don't eat. In Australia, we have a fairly good social security system that you don't have to work. You can just get money from the government and go surfing all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was difficult for us to get the same level of quality with an Australian workforce, unfortunately, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But my guys that do the final assembly on the product, they're great. But it's a little bit less technical than actually building a van from scratch.
So what is final assembly? Because I guess this is almost just a baseline question of what's done in China at this factory that's working just so top notch for you, and then whenever it comes over to Australia or I guess to the final assembly of the US, what's left?
Yeah, and so because we've been working with these guys so long, like we use all mainstream componentry, right? So we use Dometic, Truma, our windows are our Aussie Traveller. But what we do to get consistency in our builds is we will actually get containers of product and we'll send it from the US to our factory in China, and we'll send it from Australia to our factory in China for them to do assembly. So we're using the same mainstream components as every other manufacturer in Australia and the US, but we're just shipping the parts there for them to do the assembly. So when it comes in here, typically it's anywhere between 20 to 40 hours of work to get it to a level of where we bring it to your dealership.
All right. It's a finishing.
Yeah.
True.
We have to install things on the roof like the solar panels, the air conditioners, because, you know, the product doesn't fit in a container with those. Put the suspension on.
Okay. Very good. Cool.
So in Australia, as you're growing this business, as you're learning to manufacture these products, how's the competition been? What's that been like? Are they always behind you? Have you been the clear winner all of the time you've been in existence?
It's funny that you talk about that, because when I started this business, a business in Australia started at the same time, and it was called Black Series, and it was always us and them. We built the first caravan with our cooperation factory about 4 years prior to them. So we had a 4-year jump. And they're no longer in Australia. I probably put that down to they entrusted too much of the actual technical things on how to build a van to the China factory, rather than having the know-how and teaching them how to do it.
So they lost control of the production.
Well, they never had control to start off with. When it particularly came to the caravans, it's like, well, MDC's doing it. Can you guys go build this?
I see.
And so it took them 4 years to actually work it out. But you're going to make some mistakes along the way that we nailed very quickly, but because they don't have control of their factory, they didn't fix those things so quickly. So hence you hear about a lot of problems.
So Black Series is no longer selling in Australia
No.
because they are selling here in the US.
Yes.
Is that the same company?
It's the US is the China factory itself. It's not actually related to the Australian company at all. Because they were supplying the Australian company, they asked, hey, you guys are famous in Australia. Can we use your name in the US?
Okay, that's interesting.
So the name was transported, not the company, essentially.
Yeah, there's the only link between the China factory and the Australian entity Black Series was that factory was actually supplying the Australian entity. So the Australian entity was not involved in the US business at all, as far as I know.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So Black Series and MDC grew up together. You are still obviously producing there. At this point, who is your closest competitor?
I would say in Australia we have Jayco. They're the number one. They're the guys that, you know, we strive to be bigger than. But they started their business in 1975. I was born in 75.
They have a little bit of time on you.
Yeah, and we didn't build our first tent trailer until 2007. So they got quite the head start. But, you know, when they go make a comparable product that we brought to the market, that's pretty cool.
When they copy you?
Well, I can't say that, I don't know.
When they
Jayco
build
Crosstrack,
something similar.
Yeah, the Jayco Crosstrack was interesting.
Very a competitive product.
Yeah.
So Jayco to us here in the U.S. is a very different thing.
It doesn't strike me as overland and off-road at all.
Jayco in Australia.
Yeah.
And I learned that in the first half of this podcast. So it looks very much like an MDC off-road styled trailer.
Yeah, the Australian market is a little bit different to the US. We're 50% off-road overlanding. That's what we do.
50%.
50% of the market.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's
And
a lot.
I think in the US it might be 2%. maybe.
That's a little different.
Yeah, but
But growing.
Absolutely, it's growing, right? Because if you look at the likes of ARB, like they've got a good foothold over here in the US market. They're an Australian company, very successful, and
I think Patriot Campers is Australian.
yeah, Patriot Campers, they're here as well. Very nice gear they make.
So does Jayco build their product in Australia from
They
the
do.
ground up?
Yes. However, a lot of the componentry is containers out of China, which is same in any RV, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, every manufacturer has pieces that are imported. Maybe not everyone, a lot of them.
Well, I mean, whether it be the components of the chassis and the walls, or if it just be the Dometic air conditioner or the Furrion, whatever. I mean, there's so many things.
I mean, things that I look at, like just looking into your showroom there, the gas struts, they'd be made in China.
You know, the world is such smaller place than it used to be. You know, in the 60s and 70s, we would say that's made in China, that is made in the US. Now, pieces are made all over the world. We have specialties, we have things pulling together. You know, it's been a big thing in the US market talking about the chips because, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, chips were a big thing here and they went away. We're trying to bring it back so we're not so dependent. But the
computer chips, silicon chips.
Oh,
yeah. So
we were talking about tortilla
but
chips. I was getting hungry.
but yeah, we're getting hungry. Aren't we? But everything that you buy has components and at the very least raw materials that are purchased from overseas.
All over the world.
And that is the world economy.
So our windows that we use are a dual pane window. The company is an Australian company, Aussie Traveller. The windows are also made in China, but they're the best window in the world, right? But the blades for the actual windows, so the Perspex, is actually made in Slovenia.
Those aren't close to each other.
No.
and then pieced together when it gets to Australia to make this Australian marketed window.
Well, pieced in China.
Oh, pieced in
So
China.
the blade comes from Slovenia, all the catches and other things, China, and then installed into the MDC product. But they also retail those windows and the doors. Doors is pretty special as well in Australia, separately to the likes of the Australian-made products.
There's so many products, I think, in the U.S. that say American-made, but there's pieces that have to come from overseas. It may be a small piece. It may be the silicone, rings, or it could be tubing, or it could be raw materials that they use to make the computer board. I don't think the world really understood that as well. I don't think we get it now completely, but we definitely got a taste of that during COVID.
Right.
When supply chains stopped and it was a nightmare. That was horrible for the RV industry.
And see, during COVID, we actually grew very quickly and had a very good time over COVID. The reason being, we had a one-to-one relationship with our factory. And so we could grow together very quickly, whereas other companies that might be using, or you have a couple of companies that are sourcing from the one factory, they're like, well, am I going to give it to company A, company B, or company C? Mm-hmm. They're all asking to increase the quantity, but who do they choose?
Right.
Right? And so we grew very quickly. We didn't have any product shortages at all.
That's amazing.
Over COVID.
Can you say that one more time?
We didn't have any what?
We didn't have any product shortages over COVID.
That's just
that should be the title of this episode.
Our business grew.
That's how
mind-boggling.
it is.
Mind-boggling. Okay, so let's talk about the Australian market. You're kind of, are you number one, number two, number three in the off-road 50% of what's sold?
Oh, okay. In the off-road space, we are number one.
Okay. You are the best-selling off-road trailer in Australia.
Absolutely, no doubt.
Awesome.
But when you talk about Australian volume, in the last few months, we've grown into number two behind Jayco.
And that's all
So in the-
categories together.
Yeah.
That's the whole
In the
pile.
All
overall
RVs.
market, you're number 2.
Yeah.
Jayco's number 1.
Yep.
And you're number 2
Yeah.
in all of the RVs sold in Australia.
Yeah. And
Well, congratulations. That's incredible.
that's pretty cool. Like, we only really started making RVs in 2007. And they were very agricultural back then.
Right.
They were literally a tent bolted to a garden trailer. That's where we started. And we've gone from starting there to where we are now. And so we've actually just brought in an on-road range into Australia.
Oh.
So we've actually gone
Is that-
backwards.
It's more standard trailer, not
On-road
as
range.
off-road.
Oh, a standard trailer, not
Yeah.
not an overland.
So
style
we've
trailer.
built a high-end, tough as guts, overland trailer going, all right, 50% of the market in Australia is actually on-road. We're going to have to de-spec this
Uh-huh.
and create a new range. So it was really easy for us to do.
Wow. And I bet it's tough as nails too.
It's tougher than other on-road products, yeah, because we don't change the way we make things. We just, we use a different style of making it, not as much features and benefits. Like an overlanding style is a big lithium battery bank, lots of solar panels, a wired-in sine wave inverter that's going to run your coffee machine off the batteries or your air conditioner. An on-road version is you're hooking up to shore power, so you can take all that stuff away. So it's going to reduce the costs.
Sure.
Only one spare wheel instead of 2, and don't need to have a big toolbox on the front. Don't need stone guards. So things get cheaper when you start taking components that are not required when you're just driving down the road to a RV park.
Yeah.
Does it have independent suspension? Or
It still does.
Still
And the
does.
reason being is we looked at doing a beam axle, and because we make the independent suspension in-house in our factory, it's actually the same cost of going to a axle factory and going, can you supply us an axle?
Amazing.
And so
Amazing.
with the benefit of an independent suspension, it didn't make sense to go to a beam axle.
Right. Man, so you're just going to take over Australia. Is that right?
We're hoping.
You're well, I'm right there with you. Tell me what products really stick out in your mind that make an MDC so great.
Like what components?
What components, what features, is it the suspension, and why do you choose what you choose? What sticks out in your mind as far as why an MDC is so amazing?
It's hard to put a finger on it. I wouldn't say so much about the product itself, but it's the people behind the product. It's the knowledge of how to put together a travel trailer that's not going to break no matter what you do to it. And it's knowing, like, these things are all glued together, right? And we're using glues and bolts instead of staples. I guess it's a hard question for me to answer because there's just so many good things. Like we just touched on the big power systems and things that you can see easily. The independent suspension, how these things are put together. They are a aluminium frame that is TIG welded, the actual body that sits on the top of the chassis, right? The welders that we actually use to TIG weld these frames is Ferronius. They're actually made in Germany. They're $15,000 each welder. Now you can go down to the local Home Depot and probably buy a welder for like what, $200-$300?
I mean, if it's going to do TIG welding, probably $800 or up.
Cool.
But I mean, if it's TIG,
Yeah.
but certainly
Not 5,000.
right.
15,000.
$15,000
$15,000
Yeah.
for the welder.
for the welder.
And that makes the weld stronger.
It just makes it a neater welder. It's better quality. You got your cheaper machines and your better machines. They're going to do a better job. But also the way that we wire these things up, when we talk about safety and wiring, we actually have to run the electrical wires through the frame of the aluminium. Once we drill the hole for the aluminium, we actually have all the wires inside of a conduit. So it's just not wires floating around. But also where they go through the framing, we actually have a rubber grommet each side.
Right.
So when these
no
things,
rubbing friction to cut into the wires and cause a short.
exactly, and particularly when your panels are glued on, how do you go fix that if that happens?
Right.
You have to make sure right from the start that it's never going to fail. And I guess that's the important thing. You're always, a front of mind is, what is the consumer going to do with it? How are they going to try and break it? How do you make it not fail? And so I don't have a particular thing that sort of stands out, because we've been doing this for a long time. It seems second nature to me, but bringing this product into the US, it is very different. And so maybe it stands out to you guys more than myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We see a lot of different couplers. You guys use a unique coupler.
The DA35 is I think, the best coupler in the world. And what we like about that is the articulation, right? So no matter what you do with your trailer, if you're going this way, this way, this way, or this way, it just moves, right? It moves with it. And that takes actually stress off your vehicle. And for instance, just say you did something crazy, weekend warrior, and you actually rolled your trailer. It may not roll your vehicle over.
Yeah.
And so that's the safety feature, right? If you roll a vehicle on its head or several times, that's where your head is. That could, you know, or for instance, if you're, we're getting into safety now, aren't we?
I guess we are.
Well, I mean, eventually we're going to have to talk trailer share then.
Oh, that's where I was going. So if you're tearing down the road and you get the wobbles up and you roll your trailer, you may not roll the vehicle, which is cool because that's because of the hitch. But another thing we use is a anti-sway controller. So if you're an inexperienced tower or you get into a situation where a deer jumps out in front of you and you're like swerving, it's just natural instinct that you sort of swerve and it might swerve back. The trailer might actually make the vehicle become unstable. We have an electronic anti-sway controller within the trailer that if it detects sway, it'll start applying the brakes, either both or either side, to actually take that sway out. So that's a safety feature.
Yeah. And this is the system I've been like, PJ, can we put it on your trailer just to try it?
Just want to play with it.
Yeah, I kind of want to put a trailer shirt on your trailer just so that we can experience it. Because we know how it works on the MDCs.
Right.
But we also know how our personal trailers that we've had for a few years tow.
Right.
So what would the difference be?
Right. And one thing I love about MDCs is that they take all of these components and it's standard on the trailer.
Yes.
It is not like you get to choose 1,800 options, because that's not what a quality trailer is about. If you want something that you can escape with confidence, then you need to have all these components because you will have a better experience. It's going to be more capable, and it's just it's so nice that everything is part of the trailer build, and it's not an added feature.
Well, I was thinking that even with the trailers that come with the annex and this, that, and the other, it's you've decided it's just part of the deal. It's part of the MDC USA experience.
Those
to have all the
annex rooms
things.
are serious. I
Right.
mean, I will say they take a little bit to set them up, but they are serious. They are not just a cheap tent. And that's incredible to me. And then you've got the shower tent. It all is part of it. It's not, you can get this, or you can get the option, or you can add this. No, this is part of an MDC.
How long have you been doing the annex rooms and all that? And just, I mean, we've only experienced trailers of this generation that have it, but how long have y'all been doing that? And why did you all say, yeah, that's just going to be part of what we do?
Yeah. So we built our first hybrid in 2013 and we included an annex. The reason being is we started with tent trailers and they always had an annex.
Okay. Yeah.
So you always had, and the soft floor would fold out to the side and then you would put the annex on front. And essentially what it did, it doubled your undercover space. And those particular tent trailers were really targeted at families that couldn't afford a caravan. That's where we started. And so they could get into the market of a tent trailer.
Right.
And typically, you know, there would be mum and dad and 3 kids, just one room. They're not going to cop it, right? Not going to work. And also you want to always have a cover over the kitchen area if you're trying to cook, you know, out in the weather. And then it was just easy to enclose that actual roof.
Yeah.
And I agree. Most people don't even use the annex, particularly if you're overlanding because you're moving every couple of days.
Right.
If you
right.
stay for a couple of weeks, you'll put the annex on for sure.
Absolutely.
And it's not a big deal. It's just personal choice. Me, I just get lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if I don't
But
need
how
it,
nice
I'm not
to
going to
have
do it.
it.
Absolutely. It's there if you need it.
If I was set up somewhere if I hit that kind of 5-day mark in my plans, yeah, I'd put it out.
Yeah.
I'd deploy it for sure.
Absolutely.
But another thing too, if you have friends come along with you, right, in their own vehicle and they don't have an RV, you can set that annex up and put a couple of cots
Sure.
in that annex
Sure, it's
area
big
for
enough.
them.
or a couple of kids. Or a couple of kids and kids' friends. I mean, whatever you need.
5 really large dogs.
Yes. Maybe 6. I don't know.
Hey, I've noticed the overlanding in the US, it seems like everyone has a dog.
Oh, yeah. You got to have a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a
And it's got to be a
prerequisite.
big dog.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of living, kind of cosplaying a little bit. If everyone knows that term, we don't all have our own wolf dogs, so we bring a dog this big to pretend like we're out there pioneering with our wolf dog. Everyone watched Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and what was his name? Scully.
His
Sully?
name is Sully.
Sully, and he had a wolf dog, and that's part of the overlanding experience is to kind of be pioneering, and you have a wolf dog.
Well, I have to say, it is pretty nice to go out hiking with a dog. It's nice company.
Y'all don't have dogs in Australia?
Yeah. There's dogs.
But
We don't
everyone
have
doesn't have
bears though. I remember in Australia watching Grizzly Adams. It was my favorite show. He had a pet bear.
We
right?
just learned something about you.
It was meant to happen. We were meant to be here.
Yeah.
I guess.
Have you seen it? Because you've been in the U.S. enough, and even camping in the U.S. enough. Have you run across any bear yet?
No.
No. Keep trying.
Actually, what are the rules with bears?
Don't.
There's brown bears,
Vaughn,
black
don't touch them.
Yeah, don't touch them.
Don't feed
Oh,
them.
never.
Don't put a leash on it.
But like if you come across a bear, isn't it like brown you're supposed to do something? If it's black, you're supposed to, one's run and one's pretend you're dead?
First off, try to see them before they see you.
Yeah.
The black bear is much less of a threat to life than a brown bear. The brown bear, the grizzly, is the one that's more threatening. We
Aren't you
have
supposed to try
black
to
bear
look
down
big?
here.
Try to look-
you try to look big and you
Throw
try to be
things at
noisy
it.
because they
Yeah.
don't really want you. Now, the problem is, where's the baby bear?
Yeah.
Because where the baby bear is going to trigger the aggression a lot of times, or just straight up hunger. But yeah, try to look big. The black bears, I just try to make noise and back up.
When I was a kid, we were camping
Mm-hmm.
in Yellowstone, and they said if you see a bear,
Click sticks together.
because we did. No, they told us, and I remember this so clearly. I was 7 years old. How this sticks out in my mind. They said, throw rocks at them and try to hit their nose. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
right.
what?
Wouldn't that make them angry?
What?
Yeah, right.
What? I remember that so crazy. But yeah, you try to scare off a grizzly. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're caught out there in the wild with a grizzly, you try
Yeah.
to look big. You're probably not going to outrun them. So,
No.
Nah.
the big joke is outrun the person with you.
Yeah. That makes
But-
sense.
But yeah, you're not going to outrun a grizzly if they're after you. So you just have to look big.
Carry bear spray.
Yeah,
have
bear
bear
spray.
spray with you.
That's the way you do it. One of the big differences that I see between the overland crowd and the RV crowd, as you alluded to earlier, if you're just going to a campsite, you don't have to know as much and you don't have to have as much gear. You plug it in, everything works, right? So that's why these really heavy duty built units are so important, because it opens up the possibilities and you just have to learn how to manage it.
Yeah, and the way that the tech's going now with these big electrical systems, you have panels that tell you how much charge is in your battery, how many hours until you're going to run out of
Right,
charge
right.
based
Oh,
on
yeah.
Where your charge is
how
coming
many
from.
amps you're using,
Mm-hmm.
And they have come so far that you don't have to know a ton of things. You can look at your battery monitor and it can say, if you keep going with everything you're doing now, you've got 2.3 hours left.
Right. And it'll show you.
Okay, red light. Yeah. And then you turn your AC off and it says, you have 6.7 hours.
It'll show you that
you're like,
while you're using
cool.
it. It'll show you while you're using it that you're still getting a bit of a charge from solar, or if you got shore power, and you got that DC to DC charger that MDC puts in there as well, which is one of my favorite gadgets I've ever installed in one of my rigs. Is a DC to DC. Well, it's already in there.
Yeah.
So many people say, I can't even work my TV remotes. And I'm like, well, they're making that easier as well. That is, remember we used to have the basket, you probably don't. You guys don't remember? We'd have a basket of remotes trying to get everything to work.
I think it started with telling your kid to go push buttons.
Yeah.
One for the VCR, one for the TV, one for the stereo.
One for the everything, and you have to figure out which one.
The switch to switch inputs.
Well, that has come a long way. And I think the off-grid capabilities of the 3,000 watt inverter and, 1,200 watts of solar, a bank of batteries, all of that is changing. The thing that's changing the fastest to me is the lithium batteries. I know I hear solid state's coming online next. Amazing things. The solid state, that's going to change.
Renogy's, that could be in our new XT19 HRT.
Yeah, we are doing a lot with Renogy right now and really impressed with what they're coming up with. And as you said, when there's something new on the market, then all of a sudden everyone does it. Yeah. So there is going to be things in the next 2 years that are going to really change the overlanding community.
We've talked about it before.
Impressive.
The overlanding community has actually piloted a lot of the big changes that have found their way into more standardized rigs because
that's true.
Just the notion of who they are and the way they're gizmo technical minded. And so they've kind of figured out how much capacity is needed. And then the rest of the RV industry is kind of figured out more slowly. 200 watts of solar is a nice nod to the notion, but if you really want to do something, you need significantly more. And the overland community is like, yeah, we knew that. We've been doing that. We've
been doing that.
Figured
this
that
way.
out.
Yeah. Well, everything starts as an outlier and moves in, and you learn.
Cool fact for you guys, and you'll be
ready.
First to hear it. We actually have a very good relationship with Renogy. Myself and James have had some meetings with the owner, Yi Lee, and we've actually made a decision that in our new off-grid series, off-grid extreme that comes out next year, we've changed our whole system to Renogy.
We are glad to hear that because we have had several meetings with them ourselves here, and E came to visit us, and we have talked about what it takes to get it in dealerships and get it moving. So we have partnered with them as well because we build a lot of off-road systems here for people who come in and say, I want this trailer, but I want more solar. I want the 3,000 watt inverter, and I want all these things to happen. So we build it for them here. So it's nice to have a company that not only gets it and they're innovative, but the other piece is that they are now making simple, compatible products. And you would think that every company would do that, but they don't. They really lean in on one piece of it, like the batteries.
They're making it more plug and play than many manufacturers used to be.
Yes.
I mean, they're like, let's talk about connectors now because we designed the equipment, but can we connect them?
I think consumers just assume that all these things, are made and they go together. We are dealing with, and I'm going to throw this under the bus because I think they've done a better job now, but the Revolves, we were on the front end of those trailers being built that had all those components built in. They were freestanding in the beginning, and only part of it was Renogy. And we actually had to train the factory up on what wasn't working and the components that wouldn't talk to each other. It was a real problem. And so the fact that Renogy is doing such a slick job, and I don't know the technical things of why certain waves and certain this and that don't work as well together. I don't want to know that stuff. I just want to know it works.
And from an MDC perspective, what we really like is the Renogy gear is available and made same country as where our trailers are. So it's easy for us to fit that gear in. They're very committed to the US market.
Yep.
And so they're going out to all the dealers like yourselves and doing training. And hey, this is how our gear works. This is how you can do retrofits on other people's gear.
Right.
That stuff's going to come standard in our trailers. And then your techs already know how to work on it. We're supplying you guys the wiring diagrams. Nothing can go wrong, right?
Right.
Which is really cool. So
The best part to me is that we have a number to call. And the amazing thing, a human answers.
Yeah.
And we say, hey,
Yeah.
tell me about this. Is this going to work? Or this isn't working. What am I doing wrong? Or, what will I need to
They sent out a very responsive trainer.
It's just
here
amazing. Yeah,
for
they
our
sent their
team.
trainer out. We spent a few days with them here.
Yep.
I don't know.
We did a podcast with them.
So, Renogy, shout out to Renogy.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you guys are working well with them because I think they are really going to become a leader.
So do we. That's why we're using their gear.
Yay.
Go.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about?
Seemed like that kind of
I know, it did.
situation.
Go team.
MDC, Princess Craft, Renogy, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that we haven't talked about that you would like for people to know about MDC and maybe anything going forward? What can we look forward to that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess if anyone has questions, they could put them in the comments.
Sure.
And I could answer those.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah, we'll send them straight
Absolutely.
to you, Vaughn.
Yeah.
You got questions for Vaughn? Right down below.
Yeah. Good deal. I think that we should maybe take another break and go explore a little bit.
Yeah.
Find other
We do
things.
it confidently.
Escape.
Yes.
Can we escape? Clint?
Wait, is
Escape
it
with
explore
confidence?
or
Yeah.
escape?
Escape with confidence.
Okay.
Escape with confidence.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Can I suggest a change?
Sure.
I'm sure he'd consider changing his 17-year motto.
I'm happy to consider it.
Okay.
That's very politically correct.
All right,
Well,
everybody.
thank you for
Yeah.
everything. It's been great.
It's so good. You can check out the show notes at rvsmalltalk.com. You can check out the video if you want to see our bright shining faces on YouTube. Just look up RV Small Talk Podcast. And of course, on any podcast player you choose to use, RV Small Talk Podcast is there for you. That was horrible, but I said it and it's on record.
Thanks,
And
Clint.
then,
That's right.
and then we also have just some social media presence. So look us up, RV Small Talk Podcast. In the meantime, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Vaughn, and having you here. And we'll find more things to do with you guys.
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me in. And, I'd be keen to come back if you guys would have me on again.
Oh, certainly.
Always
No.
Oh,
We're going over there, and
Yes.
we're holding baby kangaroos
Absolutely.
while we do a podcast.
There it is. There it is.
We can do that.
But not a baby. I've heard they're mean.
Or
It's the older ones. The older ones, they box you.
if it's a baby, you kind of have
Okay.
to hold the mommy because the baby's in the pouch.
All right.
And the mommy might
I
like the
am
break.
the new pouch.
How about a podcast about kangaroos? What
Okay.
do you say?
All right. Yeah.
Why not?
I don't know much about kangaroos.
Yeah, me neither. We'll learn together.
Is that kind of like people in Texas don't know everything about ranches and oil
Yeah,
rigs?
you don't.
Uh,
You don't
We
ride a
kinda
horse
think
to school?
everybody- Yeah.
I have no idea about ranches and oil rigs.
Yeah, we don't either, but we live in Texas, so people assume we do. And we assume everybody in Australia knows everything about kangaroos. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
no.
not. I guess not. All right. Till next time.
Till next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.